Welcome back to She Said podcast. I'm your host, Laura Cox Kaplan, and I am so excited to have you here. This is episode 354, and it is part of this special collaboration series that we have been rolling out in conjunction with the Southern Sea. Now, if the Southern Sea is new to you, it is a network of creative founders and entrepreneurs. And the women who join me as part, sometimes men too, actually, but the women who join me as part of this series are absolutely phenomenal. And today's guest is no exception. I have been looking so forward to sharing this conversation with you because it sits right at the intersection of creativity, connection, and influence. And honestly, it is just plain fun. My guest is the fabulous Rebecca Gardner. She is the founder and creative director of Houses and Parties, and that is a design studio that spans event designs, interiors, and an online shop or e-commerce shop. And it is devoted to helping people gather beautifully, but with intention. Now, Rebecca and I, who are both Texas natives, actually met at this year's the Southern Sea Summit in Sea Island, Georgia. And as I said, this episode is part of that ongoing collaboration now in its fifth year. And these conversations allow us to go a bit deeper with founders who are building these thoughtful, creative lives and businesses. Now, at first glance, you might think that this conversation with Rebecca is just a conversation about throwing parties and entertaining. And it is that, but what Rebecca actually offers is a masterclass in something that is much bigger and frankly so needed. How we create environments at home, at work, and in our communities that help people feel seen and connected and energized. It's really a beautiful thing. And in this episode, you will hear why gathering isn't just a luxury, it's actually a strategy. And Rebecca talks about how parties and dinners and even small moments of hospitality can act as punctuation marks in our lives, essentially breaking up what can be monotonous and maybe the isolation that so many people feel, especially when our calendars are so full. Friend, this is one of those conversations that will make you maybe rethink how you host, how you collaborate, and ultimately how you show up, whether you're throwing a dinner party, leading a team, or walking into your next room with purpose. So grab a seat and get ready to be inspired. Here is my conversation with Rebecca Gardner, episode 354, part of our collaboration series with the Southern Sea. Enjoy. Rebecca Gardner, welcome to She Said.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here on the heels of meeting you in Sea Island.
I am so happy to have you, and I'm so happy that you have agreed to be part of this, the Southern Sea She Said podcast collaboration that we have been doing for the past 5 years. It is, these conversations are such a source of joy for me, and I hope for my listeners we get great feedback on them because it allows us to really deep dive into the lives of some of these creative founders and entrepreneurs like yourself. And so I'm really happy to have you here today.
Well, don't dive too deep. You might not like what you see.
I'm going to love it. Everybody's going to love it. I am really thrilled. I, of course, have your fabulous book, A Screaming Blast, behind me, which is kind of the, embodiment of your ethos. But before we get to the book, Rebecca, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what you do and a little bit about your origin story, how you got started.
I am the founder and creative director of Houses and Parties, which is a 3-ring circus. We do event design, interior design, and then I have an online shop, which is also Houses and Parties. And really, Laura, parties are parties in design, in creating little worlds, whether it's for myself or for clients, are really my love language. And I learned very, very early on, just planning my birthday parties as a child with my enabling mother, that I have a real passion for bringing people together. I love setting a table. I love creating a mood. I love creating what a serious artist would call an environmental installation. And I like that because I have found that through those elements and through sincere hospitality, you can choose your port of call and steer your ship exactly where you want it to go. And so to me, parties have always been a tool to meet people or to bring people together or to impress, or now in the case of owning my own business to um, make sure that my client wins all the awards, all the senior superlatives, the best host, the most fun, the most interesting guest list, the most surprises. And that is really what I love to do. And whether I'm doing it for a party for a client or whether I'm creating treasures to buy to enhance your own, memorable occasions on housesandparties.com. I'm always thinking about gathering and parties and people.
I love that. I love that. If you would, I'd love for you to go just a little bit deeper about what is it or what was it that really spoke to you about this concept of gathering? And the reason why I asked the question is because people are so isolated. Oddly enough, we're so connected, and yet people feel really isolated. And I think there is sometimes maybe an intimidation factor around, bringing people together. So, what was it about this that, spoke to you so early on?
Well, I feel personally that if I do not gather my friends and I do not um, put them around a table or put them at a cocktail party, and these are my parties that I do for myself,
Yeah,
or when I gather with my family and it's Christmas and it's not special, it's not beautiful. Um, then life is a bowl of oatmeal mush. Because even though my job is really, really fun and it's creative and I'm crazy about it, it's still a job. And that
right.
that is isolating. So when I think about parties, I'm not sure if I'm really answering your question. This is sort
Yeah.
of a politician's answer. But when I think about parties and I think about like this um Google Calendar, with all of these appointments day in and day out, no matter what you're doing, if you're a doctor, a lawyer, interior designer, the parties are the hot pink. The
Mm,
parties are the dangling carrots. And to me, a party doesn't have to be a giant, debutante party or a wedding. It can be dinner for four couples. But I think you have to punctuate life so that it's not all black and white on your Google Calendar.
yeah. Yeah. I love that. I absolutely love that. You're absolutely right. And it's such a fundamental component of creating a life in which you're thriving. Because to your point, even though you plan parties and events for a living, those aren't your parties, which I
Right.
think is a really important data point. So let's talk a little bit more about how you created the business, because to your point, you referred to it as a three-ring circus, but you have a really smart sort of trio of areas that you've invested in and sort of created a business around. Maybe talk about how that evolved. Where did you start, and how did you know kind of these were the different verticals that you wanted to invest in?
Well, I studied English, history, and then art history in college. And I went to the University of Mississippi and studied a lot of Southern literature. And then I transferred to SCAD, the Savannah College of Art and Design in Savannah, and studied art history. And while I was there, I also worked for the president of the college and learned how to commission artists and how to work with artists, in particular student artists. That's a very specific niche.
Right.
And I really have an appreciation for every time I say this in a meeting, my staff laughs, but like the touch of a hand. So things that are made by hand. And that doesn't mean woolly sweaters and, whatever. Um, but I love working with artists. And as an event planner, you're really like a subcontractor, or you're a contractor working with subs.
Mhm.
Um, but my subs are artists. Even if it's the lighting guy, they really have an eye and they're creative. Um, the florist, of course, the person that's doing the paper. And so I learned that very early on, studying at and working at SCAD. Um, And I still live in Savannah, surrounded by all sorts of creatives, and then the other half of my time is in New York, which is an explosion of action and creativity and making, and, that is a really big part of what I do, whether it's interior design, event design, or even my e-commerce shop, because we make everything for our e-commerce shop
Oh, wow.
besides, like, Hermes china and Puy-Fricot silver,
Right.
things that there's no reason to make. You couldn't do it better. But we commission a lot of artists, and, um, and that is what is really fun and fulfilling for me, is to make things. I forgot what the original question was,
Yeah.
I got
Well,
carried away. Oh,
we
it was SCAD, it was
Yeah,
SCAD, it was
yeah. Well,
SCAD,
we were
sorry.
we were talking about sort of how you designed the business to be sort of trifolds. You have events
Right,
and
right.
parties, you have the e-commerce
Okay.
store, and then you have the interior design
Well,
store.
and
And sort of
Laura, anytime I start using my
what
hands,
a
you gotta reel me back in.
listen,
Um
we are fellow Texas girls. I'm with you, sister.
Yeah, we'll just have a secret side.
Exactly.
I went to SCAD to study art history. While I was there, I worked for the college. I had a title called the director of creative initiatives.
Wow.
And I worked with artists on the school's permanent collection of art. We created installations. We did party decor. I worked on a program called SCAD Style, which brought movers and shakers from all over the world, really, to Savannah to meet with students. I met a lot of amazing people then. Um, and from there, I had always had an entrepreneurial spirit. Um, Even in high school, I made invitations for big parties from my mother's friends. Um, and I wanted to open my own business. And so I started with interior design, and I did events thinking that I would do that if the interiors didn't take off initially.
Mhm.
And it was quite the opposite of what I thought. It was the events that went crazy. And I had a lot of contacts and friends in New York, and that is where my business really started and thrived,
Mhm.
because I was able to do really wonderful small events for luxury brands,
Mm,
because they were at the beginning. So I started my business in 2011. So that was really the beginning of creating content and making sure that whatever the action was looked like your brand, and that the right people were there, and sort of the beginning of Instagram.
yeah.
And so I did a lot of events, and really established my business in New York and beyond, doing um sort of smaller, very thoughtful, and I say smaller, like under 100 people,
Yeah.
thoughtful, um, experiences for luxury brands. And then, of course, we do weddings.
Mhm.
At the start of my business, I did a lot of weddings. Now we do about 2 to 3 a year by choice, just because it is such a, fun, I mean, I love it, fun, intimate experience. But I have a fairly small team, and everyone is involved. We're not an event factory.
Yeah.
Um, so I started with events and interiors, and I was like, uh I was like a Southern bride that didn't even have a boyfriend when COVID hit, and I had a file ready to go for this e-commerce shop. I
Mhm.
always wanted to have a retail space. I had tons of ideas. I had all my tear sheets. I was just always scared to do it, honestly, Laura, with
Mm.
the risk financially, and then also just with the workload. And within a period of 2 weeks, 3 years of work and contracts were wiped out during COVID.
Oh.
And I thought, well, hell, I'm going to work at J. Crew, or I'm going to do this. And I had all these amazing people that I really um, rely on and appreciate and adore and love working for me. And a lot of them had worked for me for quite a while. And so we pulled off the band aid and dove in. And by October 2020, we launched housesandparties.com.
Amazing. That is amazing. How does houses and parties support the other 2 verticals, if at all? Or do they essentially operate as, freestanding entities? Does that make sense?
Well, they're freestanding entities, as far as the structure of my business goes,
Okay.
but we have all three share marketing, social media. in any sort of promotion and conversation. And I think that anytime I do a party for a client, it feeds excitement towards our website. And I think all of the content and the things that you can buy on our website that are special and fun spark ideas to hire us for a party, when a special occasion comes. The idea of ecom is that um, of housesandparties.com is that you can buy a party, buy a seasonal collection. So one important part of what we do is dazzling photography
Mm,
in aspirational settings. And so on my website, you'll see the napkins, you'll see the tablecloth, but you can also buy the entire party, which is usually by tables of 8.
yeah.
Um, and that tells the whole story. So that gives you all the bells and whistles. And we have a whole section on our website called entertainments, which are things really just to make your party fun and shake it up, whether it be a party cracker with, parlor games as a prompt, like do your best Mick Jagger after dinner, or um, we have uh, escort cards that say shag, marry, kill with all sorts of crazy names on the back. And even if you're having a professional luncheon or dinner, these things get people talking, which makes for a better party because there is nothing worse than dreading going to a party. That is so sad and it's such a waste of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so one of the things that I was thinking about as you were talking, how typical is it? You have an interesting background, I think, to become an event planner because your background is so tightly wound around design, right? You really studied and went deep into the design world, and I'm curious if you think that is a sort of a differentiator for you. I don't know a lot of event planners that have that same background. Isn't that unusual, or is it just
Oh,
I'm
I've never thought about that. That's a nice thought. I will tell you that I use color theory and the power of a triangular composition every single day.
yeah.
And our our look, if that's what you want to call it, is sort of unabashed and bountiful and wild.
Yeah.
But we do start with good taste and then shake it up.
And that is a really, really good point because I think it's sometimes for those of us who do not have that same design background, I see the things that you put together and I go through the pages of your gorgeous book, which of course is called A Screaming Blast, by the way, for anyone who's not watching us. But I look at these pages and I'm like, I could never put that combination together quite that way. Like, I wouldn't know where to start, and I feel like sometimes people look at these amazing pages and they're like, "How?" Because it is over the top and it works. So, maybe
Good, thank you. Yeah.
you're welcome. Not to give away all of your secret sauce, but if you were to give someone maybe a little bit of advice on how to start, someone who does not have your keen eye and design background, what are maybe some tips for creating an experience that's wow, maybe a little more over the top, but getting the balance right?
Um, I think that the most important thing is lighting.
Mm,
You could put a brown paper bag down on the table like you're at a barbecue place in Lockhart, Texas, and if the lighting's good, everyone has a better time. I think you also want to make sure that the drinks are good so that
mm.
everyone can have a delicious strong drink when they walk in the door and not some fruity thing with skewers shooting out of it. There like that is one of the few places that I'm pretty practical. Um, and then as far as making the decor, I encourage you to think about the whole room. So what's on the floor, what's on the ceiling, and then of course what's right in front of you on the table. I also think that it is really nice if you have the luxury of space to move from space to space throughout the evening, even if it's a small dinner party, so you don't feel stuck.
Yeah.
Um, One great gift that a host can give their guests is sort of bookends for fabulous conversation. When you're doing a seated dinner in particular, you have an obligation to be really thoughtful about where you seat your guests. And it's a really beautiful thing to think that you are giving someone an environment just for them, 24 inches designed just for them for usually an hour and a half.
Right.
And you choose who's seating to the right, who's sitting to the right, across from them to their left. And so I think that um, there's a social contract, there's an exchange between your effort and their time, and that really needs to be honored. So I would be really thoughtful about introductions and seating. And then as far as the design part goes, I mean, those are all sort of like structure
Yeah.
tips, but as far as the design part goes, set a beautiful table that you're comfortable with, that's appropriate with your best things, and then think about how you can communicate abundance. So you might go to Whole Foods and find the most beautiful, teeny little champagne grapes, not those pedestrian, waxy, big fat things, but beautiful, weird little things. Or are there rambutans because they're in season? Or is the dragon fruit crazy when you cut it open with those black and white polka dots? And add that to your table, but don't sprinkle it in. You've got to go big or go home.
Yeah. Yeah. I love all those tips. That's amazing. One of the things that I always like to do, especially if I'm a guest, certainly if I'm a host, but generally I already know this if I'm a host. But if I'm a guest, if I can know who the other attendees are likely to be and do research on them if they're people that I don't know, or think about topics that
Right,
we might want to talk about so
right.
that at least I have a few things in my back pocket if I'm seated next to somebody who's maybe a little less or maybe more reserved, little harder to talk to, or from some industry that's completely, outside of my domain. I kind of like to do that too. I'm curious, Rebecca, you talked a little bit about, throwing parties and designing invitations for your mom growing up, but I know from reading your book that the women in your family had a big impact on how you think about entertaining. Maybe talk a little bit about that inspiration, maybe share a story or two about those women and how they affected you.
Sure. Well, I had a grandmother that was a fabulous cook. And in my child's mind's eye, she had a kitchen island that was 100 feet long. And there were always things steaming and stewing and baking. And she ran a very formal house. We lived in South Texas, and my grandfather was a doctor, and there were a lot of people coming in and out of town all the time. Um, and so when it was just family, we would sit at like the kitchen banquette in her 1950s, kitchen banquette was quite jazzy, in her kitchen. And then a lot of times we would sit in the dining room, and everything was starched and pressed, and all the silver, polished and felt lined drawers, all ready to celebrate. And even if it was just family in the kitchen, um, or at the kitchen banquette, everything was beautiful and had incredible effort. And I didn't really realize until I was cleaning out storage of their houses, which bizarrely sat for years, like 20 years after they died.
Oh,
So
wow.
this was just a couple of years ago at the time that I was writing this book. I saw all of this effort in these boxes, and it was so touching to me because it was all for family and
Yeah.
friends. She wasn't doing this for a business or to impress or whatever. And that was really, really dear. It's something that I felt as a child
Uh-huh.
because I always felt so welcome in her home, and I was always so comfortable and so indulged and so entertained. But I didn't really realize what the effort was until I was an adult. So my grandmother was a very formal, sort of fancy entertainer, and my mother entertained just as much. But my mom had sort of a devil may care, last minute, 30 people on the back lawn. Um, uh, big salad. She would make this thing called beer bread, which literally was with a can of
Yes, I know
beer.
it.
It's so
Of
good. Like
course.
I actually haven't thought about that in forever. Um, but but my mom would sort of, like in the Big Chill where they close the oven with their hip. I mean, it was that kind of thing. And I do a little of both. Just depends on where I am. Obviously, entertaining in my tiny New York apartment is much different than my house in Savannah. And I encourage clients, even if they have my team there, orchestrating every single light bulb and every single movement, it is their responsibility to kick off their shoes, perch on the side of a rolled arm sofa, and pass compliments and canapes to all their guests with equal abandon. I allow them the ease to win Best Actress, for the most welcoming, kicked back, calm host. But there has to be an element of um, warm, welcome, and casual, no matter how dressy the party.
Yeah, yeah. So if you could dig into that a little bit more and maybe give us perspective on, you show up at someone's house for, a nice dinner party, and you walk in the door and you know immediately it's either going to be a win or not not a win. What are maybe those tips that you would say that you know instantly this is going to be like a great night?
Oh, I think vibe and smiles and laughter, and that is all the responsibility of the hostess at the
Yeah.
very beginning. I think passing a strong drink that you actually want to drink always helps to loosen things up. Um, I think lighting, we talked about that. And then also, Laura, I like these old fashioned sort of, you were talking earlier about doing research on people. I
Mhm.
like these old fashioned sort of ideas, very old fashioned, clench your pearls of like a receiving line or a
Oh,
dossier
yeah.
if it's a business gig. I don't think that it needs to be the devil wears Prada or like you're on the advance team for a presidential candidate.
Right.
It's the same thing that you were saying. You don't need to have elbow length gloves and stand with your husband at the front door, but do stand at the front door and do grab someone by the wrist and say, I want you all to meet each other because. Or do spend some time the night before sending a quick email like, you should know that Laura is also from Texas and she was just in Sea Island interviewing that brilliant woman that started Birdies that you love. I mean, anything like that. So the
Yeah.
dossier doesn't have to be a list of people that you email to the whole party. I find that sort of cringy and pretentious, but there are connections that you want to make. And unless you have a PR team there with a Ann Taylor twin set and a, microphone, I don't know
Yeah.
how you could do it all. And I think that makes people feel comfortable. They have something to say. I used to have to go to all these parties for work, and I would say things like, oh, I love your shoes to every single person, just to start a conversation. And then I'd go home and go, you could have done better than that. But an email would have helped.
Sure.
So I think those old fashioned sort of things make people feel comfortable.
Yeah, but even the observation of the shoes sometimes breaks the ice. And
Right.
sometimes, people are reluctant to say something like that because, oh, I could, to your point, like I could say something else or say something smarter. But at the same time, like the goal really is to break the ice with the person. And if that's what gets you there, then you're probably in a better position than if you had said nothing at all, right?
Thank
And
you,
who
Laura,
doesn't
for
want their
taming
shoes?
my 2003 anxiety. Yeah,
I
just say
love it.
something, my God. And another thing that my mom used to always say is be sure to be more interested than you are interesting yourself.
Amen. Amen. That's such good advice, and that applies whether it's a party, it applies in every setting, I think. Let's talk a little bit about creation under constraints. You clearly have all of this incredible creative energy and, passion and vision. But talk about how you manage that because even the most creative people that I know and who I've talked to on this podcast can hit a lull. And I think in event planning in particular and the work that you're doing, it is so intense. Talk about how you manage your creative energy. What do you do when you kind of get to the burnout stage? Maybe you don't, but most people do. And so, what do you do to refuel?
I mean, we've been doing events since 2011, and I have before that. So we have a pretty um, successful structure of how we execute an event. And really, the burnout is not the creative burnout. That's the fun part. I mean, I have ideas. I have as many ideas as I do like Amex points. I mean, that I'm never worried about running out of ideas, but the physical exhaustion
Yeah.
is something different altogether. And I am the first one there and the last one to leave
Mm.
still. I'm the big cheese and the boss and I've got a big team, but I don't leave until everybody else leaves. Um so, uh, I hibernate after a big event
What does that
for
look like?
days.
What does that look like for you?
I go for really long walks and I read and I take insanely hot John Wayne baths and I make notes, lots of notes about what went wrong and about what went right, and, I give myself 2 days.
Mhm, mhm. I
I have
love
someone,
that.
like, pull my hair and massage my shoulders. I have 10,000 manicures and a facial and whatever else makes me feel good.
Yeah, I love what you just I mean, all of that is great, but I love especially what you said about your basically your post-game strategy. Like, you're doing a review on what went wrong and also, really importantly, what went right.
Yeah.
And as you look back on those things, right, all hell could have been breaking loose, but if you've celebrated the things that actually did go right, then getting that balance can be a really important sort of aspect of that. Talk a little bit about your, obviously collaboration is at the heart of the Southern Sea. It's a really important component associated with connecting and with thriving in our lives, whether it's work or just life in general. But maybe talk a little bit about what you're looking for in your collaborative partners. You talked about, you're relying on vendors, you have a big team, you got all these people that you're working with. Maybe provide some advice and perspective for things that are so essential to you when you think about collaborative partners.
A sense of humor,
Mm,
a candid conversation about cost. Um, Gosh, I have the best team. Not just the people that work for me. I mean, my much bigger team are people that we work with over and over on both events and interiors. Um, and events specifically are live theater. And so you want someone that is calm in a storm. You want someone that you can rely upon, with whom you have a mutual trust. Um, and you share an ultimate goal, someone that cares about their reputation, someone that, um, when you have a last minute windstorm, um, isn't negotiating the price of anchoring the tent, they're just doing it, you
right.
know?
Mm.
Um, I'm really, really lucky in that way. But um, I've also made a real effort from the very beginning to maintain intimate relationships. I mean, no French kissing, Laura, but intimate relationships with my vendors, like birthdays and births and notes and follow up and photography and whatever that love requires. Because we need them, they make us look good.
Yeah.
Particularly florists, lighting guys, tent guys, caterers. There's always going to be something that goes wrong at a party. We plan like hell and it decrease our margin of error to basically nothing, but there's always something that happens, and it's my job to make sure no one knows, and I require, sort of everybody else to help me troubleshoot.
Yeah, yeah. I absolutely love that, and I think it's, some would say it's just good manners, right? To keep track of the people who are working with you so that they feel seen and supported and loved and cared about. But when you're doing this at scale at the level that you're doing it, that's a lot of people. Is there some kind of infrastructure that you've put in place to help you manage kind of the personal touch points with all of these vendors and collaborators?
No. I mean, there will be, um, like my director of events will assign someone to each vendor. And at the end, either her name is Kimberlyn and I will write a note to every single person.
Yeah,
Um, that's my trick is
yeah,
writing a note. I feel like it's something that very few people do. Um, it's an obvious time commitment. It's a surprise. It's a delight to receive that in the mail, even though it might arrive, 6 months later covered in mud. Um, but yeah, that's what I do.
yeah.
And it is certainly good manners, but it's also self-serving.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah,
It
it
works.
absolutely is. Yeah, no, I think it's genius, and I think it's oftentimes overlooked. I think it's such an important thing, and yet it's kind of an overlooked skill. Um, we you and I sort of started this conversation before we started the
Yeah.
conversation, talking a little bit about this idea of social architecture. And when I wrote the question, it's kind of a weird question and we discussed it, but I was sort of getting at the idea of like how you think about influence in a room. And we may have talked about this already, but I kind of like the construct of this idea of a social architecture. Maybe talk a little bit about how you think about that in the context of your personal influence.
Well, I think specifically we were talking about sort of how I can serve my clients in
Yeah.
that way. And whether I'm working for a brand or a personal client, so a launch of a new luxury product or a 50th birthday, um, this little world that we create, which is a party, is like a representation of my client as if it were their home. And sometimes it is in their home. And so it's my responsibility to go on a lot of dates with that client and figure out what it is that they want to say and help them with what they want to say. Most importantly, being excitement that you're here and graciousness. Um, I always tell brides, it doesn't matter how many dresses you change into, the wedding dress to the cocktail dress to the departure dress. Like, if your guests have to stand in line at a bar, your wedding's lame. I mean,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah.
Hot Chardonnay, kiss of death. Um, so um what I do for clients is create an environment that represents them and the message that they want to impart.
Mhm.
And um ultimately, if the people are lame, your party is lame, but I can help with that too. Because if people feel comfortable and people feel well taken care of, they feel like they are a special guest. Even a guest at the corner of the 10-foot table can be made to feel special when an introduction is made and they're sitting next to someone with whom they connect over a mutual such and such.
Yeah.
And so every single person in that room should walk out feeling special to have been there.
Yeah.
And that benefits the purpose of the party and the hostess and my client.
Yeah, I love that. It also strikes me, maybe this is the podcaster in me, but you're also creating a story. You're
Sure.
helping her tell a story. So, I called it social architecture, but really it's storytelling. It's
Yeah.
what's the takeaway? What is the story that you want to tell with this event or this gathering of these people? And what do you want them to take away from that and remember from that evening? It's really
The other
beautiful.
thing is it's just so fun. Like, it's fantasy. I mean, we're hitting on all these sort of serious points and my background in art history and social architecture, which I'll definitely be using that again. I like that. But the truth is, it's damn fun. And
Yeah.
you're making a memory, and it is a pursuit of pleasure. And certainly it has an undercurrent to celebrate, to gather, to impress, to introduce. There's always a purpose, but you're creating fantasy, and that is the difference between interiors, where certainly you're doing all of these things that we're talking about. But with an event, it's one night only, and there's sort of a freedom in that. You can be outlandish. It's your job to be entertaining. Um, and I love that. I love the fantasy.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so awesome. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about the book. When I picked it up, I was so excited. It is a beautiful, for those of us who are watching this podcast versus listening to it, it is a beautiful, beautiful coffee table book. Which is otherwise when it's not behind my desk, it's sitting on my coffee table now.
Good.
But one of the fun things is I opened up the book, immediately found the foreword written by Sofia Coppola.
Oh,
So
I know.
tell us.
Lucky me.
That is so, and I was like, "Wait a minute, that's Sofia Coppola? How did that come about?" That's very cool.
Oh my gosh. She had shopped at my store, and every time it would come through on Shopify, I'd like have this little jolt, my toes would curl so tightly I couldn't walk. And I saw her. This was maybe 2021 something.
Mhm.
And so everyone was still wearing surgical masks, in the West Village. And I had been living mostly in Savannah, and I had gone I had traveled to New York with my team to go to some sort of show, like the gift show or something like that, and I took everyone to dinner at Via Carota, which is such a fab restaurant, I think the best Italian in New York, and probably 3 bottles of wine into our dinner, I catch myself swiveling totally to the right. And Colby, who is the director of retail, said, "Don't do it. Do not do it." And he grabbed my coat sleeve. It was Sofia Coppola. And she was at dinner at Via Carota. And I walked over and I had sort of like purple wine teeth. I'd really been celebrating, but it was covered by my surgical mask. And I said, "Sophia, it's me." As if she would know who I was. I mean, she had just been shopping on my store, and her husband sort of elegantly, but also with, chivalrous concern, introduced himself, and I said, "It's me. You shop with me." And she kind of said, "Oh, how lovely. Well, so nice to meet you. I hope you enjoyed your dinner." And I ripped off my mask, thinking she would know who I was. "Sophia, it's me. It's Rebecca." And she said, "Lovely. I hope you enjoy." I mean, it just kept going on and on and on. And finally I said, "I have a store called Houses and Parties." And she said, "Oh, right, from down south." Oh, Laura, I mean, I went back to my hotel room just pacing like Lady Macbeth. I mean, if I made a fool of myself, why did I do that? Why didn't I listen to Colby? And damn if the next morning I didn't get an email from her husband wanting me to do her 50th birthday.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
Oh my God, that's an amazing
So
story.
we've done several parties for her, and she's incredibly generous and every bit as lovely and creative and kind and unassuming um, as you would expect and want her to be. She's
Yeah,
sort of a magical, creative unicorn lady mystic inspo.
yeah. Amazing. That is amazing. Maybe talk a little bit about why you decided to put the book together. It is fabulous. This is your first book, right? Am I right on
This is
that?
my first book.
Okay.
Um, I always wanted to do a book, and I had been saving, like marketing and social media just absorbs like a sponge every photo that you have, and I've just been carefully protecting these particular parties for about 5 years, and saving the photos in anticipation of a book. And I was thrilled to hear from Rizzoli. They reached out to me to create this book, and I had the photos ready to go. And we decided that I really did not want a how to. I wanted a book of fantastical ideas and inspiration. So it would be divided by um, essays instead of, a copious amount of text.
Mhm.
Um, I did want to have this library of resources in the back of the book where I sort of shared where I think you can do the best stationery, buy the best satin ribbon, whatever. That's sort of an ethos of houses and parties and the purpose of our newsletters, which is also resources. Um, and I put the book together. Um, I printed out all the photos on 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper. I could have bought like a used Kia, those cheap cars for what that cost. And I drank a bunch of coffee and got up early one morning and taped them all over my garage and arranged them where I wanted them to be. Adam Kuehl is a fabulous photographer with whom I've worked really since the beginning of my SCAD days, and he shoots everything for houses and parties. He came over that night and sort of edited and critiqued, and that was wonderful. And then over a long weekend, I wrote the essays, and I had another friend who's a fabulous writer help me edit. So that was done. And the third was working with an amazing designer that put together the book with all sorts of archival prints from Brunswick and Fee and Lee Joffa. I was really grateful to Kravitz for letting me dig around in their archives. And some of those, but
Uh-huh.
some of them are from the, 50s and 60s old Brunswick fabric. And I think that just added one more layer of panache.
Yeah, well, even the cover, right, this is a vintage fabric, isn't it? I don't
Yes, it's a Kravitz fabric. It's
Yeah,
a
yeah, it's gorgeous.
Bargello print.
Really, really gorgeous.
Yeah.
One thing we didn't talk about, and I'm going to have to let you go. But one thing we didn't really talk about was food. You can tell where my priorities are.
Yeah.
Maybe any advice on kind of how you make the food and the environment sort of bring all the pieces together, including the food. We talked about the cocktails, but we didn't really talk about the food. So talk about any, advice or perspective that you have about incorporating the food. Do you start with the food, or do you start with the vision and sort of what you want it to look like?
I think that the food is secondary to the environment and the comfort and the entertainment.
Mm,
I think it's necessary that you feed people and feed people well. But gathering a big group for a party is never an opportunity to shine on your cuisine sophistication.
mm.
I think sitting at a fancy restaurant is the perfect time to eat um, tiny bits of fish with pea foam and shaved truffle. I do not think that a big group of people is an effective way to show off preciousness. I think you want to give people something that is delicious, something that they know, something that they like to eat, and lots of options for picky eaters. Um, a caterer doing a party is never going to execute something complicated like a restaurant.
Yeah.
They're oftentimes working in makeshift kitchens. They're serving, 100 to 200 people at a time. And it's best that it comes out on time and that it tastes good and that it's warm and that you have options for people that have a lot of dietary requirements. I never ask, I just have options.
Yeah, I love that. No, I actually think that's really smart. Otherwise, you get into all of the sort of the customization as opposed to just offering people, optionality. Okay, I could continue this conversation for the rest of the
So
afternoon, and
fun.
my guess is my listeners like, "No, don't let her go," because this is so much fun and you've offered so much great advice and perspective. I've just loved it. It's been so fun, but it's also, your approach is so very thoughtful in terms of how you think about the curation of this magical experience that helps to bring people together and help them ultimately connect more fully. So I absolutely love it. Absolutely loved the conversation with you, and just so grateful that you spent time with me today.
Well, let's throw a party. Not
Let's
in
do
DC
it.
though. Too
Well, why
cold.
not? Why? Well, it is a little cold, right? Maybe we'll wait until
In
spring.
the spring. A cherry blossom party.
Oh, what a good idea. I
I'm
love
so
that.
glad to meet you. Thank you for having me.
Of
It was wonderful to listen to you in Sea Island and even more fun to have you all to myself.
Aw, thank you. I feel the same way. It was really, really great. I'm so grateful. The Southern Sea is really grateful, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you. Bye.